Welcome to the Dry Eye Club Seeing Outcomes Webinar 2025, The Real World of Dry Eye. My name is Maria Cabrera Aguas. I will be your moderator today. I'm a research associate at the Cornell Research Group at the University of Sydney. Before we start our webinar today, I would like to recognize and pay respect to the elders and communities past, present, and emerging of the lands that the University of Sydney campuses stand. For thousands of years, they have shared and exchanged knowledges around innumerable generations for the benefit of all. Here I'm sharing the agenda for today. So we have several speakers and a patient who is going to share her experience with us. So please, I will share some housekeeping rules. Please keep your audio off and video muted at all times. If you have questions, please post them on the Q&A box, which is on the bottom of the screen. We will have a Q&A session after the presentations. During the webinar, I will launch 2 polls. The first poll will be launched before the first speaker and the second before the third speaker. And at the end of the webinar, we will ask you to kindly complete a short feedback form to help us improve for the following year. And at the end of this week, we will send a link of this webinar recording to all of you. So let's start with the first poll. Launch. So I'll kindly invite you to respond these 3 questions that are very quick. I will give you 1 to 2 minutes. Can you see the poll, you guys? So our first speaker is Professor Stephanie Watson. She's the chief investigator of the SafeSide Dry Eye Registry, head of the Cornell Research Group, SafeSide Institute at the University of Sydney. She's the head of the corneal unit at the Sydney Eye Hospital, the chair of the Australian Vision Research, vice chair of the Asia Pacific Ophthalmic Trauma Society, and vice chair of the RANSCOM New South Wales Health branch. She will present on the SafeSide Dry Eye Registry. So I will stop sharing.
Thank you, Maria.
Thank you, Stephanie.
I'll just share my slide and just get a minute to get it into slide view. Okay. So I'm going to talk about the SafeSight Dry Eye Registry, which is finding the evidence so we can improve patient outcomes. The poll's just reappeared there if you still want to answer the poll. So how do we know if a treatment is safe and whether it works? So in medicine, we have this pyramid of evidence. And so to determine if a treatment is safe and works, we see what evidence we can get from studies that are done. And the ultimate evidence is clinical practice guidelines that have been based on data from randomized controlled trials. But in practice, randomized controlled trials are done under very strict conditions. They're very expensive to run and look at very specific groups of patients. So another form of evidence that we can use is what's called real-world data. And this is data related to patient health status and or how healthcare is delivered that's collected from sources routinely, such as electronic medical records, Medicare claims data, and registries. Now, this data normally just has a purpose in managing patients, but can actually be used to derive what we call real-world evidence, which is evidence about the usage and benefits of treatments and their safety. So this illustration here shows you the difference between a registry and a clinical trial in terms of the patients that are included. So in the real world, there's a whole bunch of patients with different conditions, different other diseases that use their medications in different ways that's been prescribed in a randomized controlled trial. So the trial includes a small group of patients, but registries can include a much larger group of patients, and they can follow treatments over a longer period. And the patients included can have a variety of coexisting conditions. So to try to find out more about dry eye disease, because it remains a burden for many patients, I set up the Fight Corneal Blindness project based on the SaveSight registries and started the Dry Eye Registry in 2020, about the time that COVID struck. And the plan for the registry was for it to inform on the findings from the real world, to find out what was happening in everyday clinical practices with patients with dry eye. And this was to understand the effectiveness and safety of the therapies that they were using, and also to understand the patient perspective. And this is to add to the data that's available from randomized controlled trials. So the registry launched in 2020, established in 20, launched in 2021, and we've now grown to over 1,000 eyes. The registry collects what we call PROMs, and these are patient-reported outcome measures, and this enables us to find out what patients think about their treatment and the benefits of it. And this is via 2 questionnaires that have been validated, and Dr. Kanda will talk about this later on. And the questionnaires can be filled out either on paper using an iPad, or a link can be sent to the patient who can fill it out on their computer or mobile. This is an example of some ocular surface disease index and ocular comfort scores from a patient at each of their visits when they've been in attendance. And you can see over here a change in the scores initially from severe. At some points, the symptoms are mild, other points moderate. So this is very useful for tracking patient outcomes, because we can compare from visit to visit how the condition is. Clinical findings are also included in the registry. And there's visual scales to help clinicians make sure they're recording what they see the same at each visit. Staining of the surface of the cornea is included, and this is a key sign of dry eye. This is a summary that the registry generates when a patient's treatments are put into the registry at each visit. And it's very easy for the clinician then to see what treatments are being used and then correlate that back with the symptoms. The registry also produces aggregate reports, and so the clinician can then review the treatment and benchmark their treatments against other clinicians in the registry. So all up, we've found the SaveSight Dry Eye Registry to be an easy-to-use tool, able to facilitate the collection of large amounts of data for dry eye from real-world clinical settings. And we're using the data to perform comparative analysis of existing dry eye treatments, assess patient outcomes, look what's happening in the long term, and also understand patient benefits of treatment. But we still do need randomized controlled trials. These trials are important to measure the effectiveness of a new interventional treatment. They are resource intensive and expensive, but they're needed if we want new treatments to reach the market. So clinical trials, in a very rigorous way, examine the safety and effectiveness of a treatment. And they're the last step before regulation. And there's different phases of clinical trials depending on what stage of development the drug is in. We're running clinical trials at the Sydney Eye Hospital, and we'll have some information in the chat if you want to be part of a clinical trial. Here is some information on a trial that we have going at the moment, and we'd like people with moderate to severe dry eye disease to consider taking part. Who could take part? You can take part if you're aged 18 years or older and have moderate to severe dry eye for at least 6 months. And if you join in, the participation will last about 13 weeks and include about 6 visits. And it's really valuable for helping us to get these new treatments into the clinic. The contact information is here if you'd like to be part of a clinical trial, and we'll also place this information in the chat and it'll be available to you after. I'd like to thank my research group, and thank you all for listening. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you.
Thank you for introducing us to the dry eye registry. So now let's moving on to our next speaker. I'm gonna share his bio. Okay, so our next speaker is Dr. Himal Kandel. He's a Kornhauser Research Fellow at the Safe Side Institute, University of Sydney. He will present on understanding quality of life impact of dry eye disease. Welcome, Himal.
Thank you, Maria. Let me just share my screen. Thank you, Maria. Quality of life is a multidimensional construct. Our previous research has shown that there are actually 12 domains of quality of life, and some of them include physical functioning or activity limitations, emotional well-being, symptoms, economic well-being, social well-being, inconvenience, and mobility. Quality of life measurement is really important, because it reflects the real life burden of disease and treatment. And anything we do as a clinician must be to uplift the quality of life of our patients. So it must be the central to care. And in for clinical practice or for research, quality of life data can be collected using validated questionnaires. Um, and Professor Watson briefly mentioned about what tools are used in the SafeSide Dry Registry for measuring quality of life. I'll go a bit more in details about them. The first one was the OSDI questionnaire. This is globally the most commonly used dry eye questionnaire, and it has content on symptoms like light sensitivity, grittiness, sore eyes, blurred vision, and poor vision. It also has content on activity limitations, reading, driving at night, using computer, watching TV. These are the common activities that the patients with dry eye do, and the dry eye can impact these activities. Similarly, there are three other items on various um, situations like windy conditions, low humidity, and air conditioned environment. Uh, there is another questionnaire that we have in the registry called OCI, Ocular Comfort Index. Although OSDI is the most widely used questionnaire, some evidence is there which shows that OCI is better in terms of measurement, in terms of psychometric properties. This is important because we know quality of life, we want to measure quality of life, but it is of course not as easy as measuring length or weight. So, but we do need to follow some fundamental principles of measurement, and we so that we want to make sure like whatever we measure is the thing that actually want to measure. So we can the clinicians in the registry use OCI as well. And the third questionnaire we have is for the mental health patient health questionnaire. We have two items on anxiety, feeling nervous, and not being able to stop or control worrying, and two items on depression, little interest or pleasure in doing things, and feeling down, depressed, or hopeless. Well, recently, there's growing evidence showing that dry eye does impact mental health as well. So we are in the registry, we are tracking this using the patient health questionnaire. We do have items on screen time and medication use as well, as these factors can affect quality of life as well. Uh, One of the challenges in quality of life research are using them in the clinics, especially in the clinics, is mm, uh, like some kind of calculations needs to be done to derive a score, which is a challenge, like why it is not commonly used in the regular clinical practice. But in SafeSide Dryer Registry, we have addressed these limitations. When the clinicians use the registry, they get yeah, as soon as the questionnaire is filled out, the scores, clinician can see the scores, and they can also compare the scores with the ones that for example, in this screen you can see there is a screenshot here of the data from two visits of the same patient, and immediately the clinician can see whether the patient is doing better or has gone worse in terms of quality of life. Patients usually fill out the questionnaire in the clinics or in waiting rooms, or can be filled out in paper or on iPad. But now, recently, even the clinicians or the practice managers can send the questionnaire on patient's mobile phone as well, and can be filled out remotely. So that was at the individual level. But the registry data is also really useful to understand at the population level. This is one example of the high quality research we do at the registry, looking at the impact of dry eye disease on patient reported quality of life. It was recently published in the Ocular Surface Journal, which is the leading journal in the field. And it was also presented in the ARVO conference, which is again the most respected vision science conference globally. And it was covered by several news media as well. Uh, to highlight some of the findings in this study, patients with mixed dry eye disease had worse quality of life than those with only aqueous deficiency or only evaporative dry eye disease. So these are the three different types of dry eye disease, and we could show that okay, this is the group that might come with reduced quality of life. Similarly, patients with corneal neuropathic pain were associated with reduced quality of life than other patients. Likewise, we found weak or insignificant correlation between quality of life and dry eye signs, which again highlights like measuring quality of life is really important and should be part of the comprehensive outcome assessment in dry eye disease. And if you want to know more about the registry, please go to our website, and thank you for listening.
Thank you, Himal, for for teaching us about the patient-reported outcomes and the quality of life. Okay, let's continue with our next speaker. She's Dr. Ngozi Chidet-Boka. She's a postdoctoral research associate at the and the clinical coordinator for cornea research group at the SafeSide Institute. She will present on real-world outcomes of dry eye disease symptoms and clinical science from everyday clinical practice. Welcome, Ngozi.
Thanks, Maria. I'll go ahead and share my screen now. Thank you, Maria, for the introduction. So dry eye disease is a chronic condition that requires working with patient characteristics to be able to manage it. There are common real-life triggers of dry eye disease, which may include environmental factors, contact lens use, digital screen use or screen time, and then poor blinking. We also have common symptoms of dry eye disease, which could be poor, painful or sore eye, itchiness, watery eyes, grittiness, or foreign body sensation. As well, we have common signs, which may be eye redness, watering, low tear volume, tear film instability, or eye surface staining. And so individuals impacted with dry eye disease often adopt multiple daily care or routines, such as use of artificial tears, warm compresses, eyelid massage, protective sunglasses, also environmental modifications, such as using humidifiers or air conditioning, avoiding air-conditioned rooms, or staying hydrated. As highlighted by Professor Watson, we have evidence from real-world clinical trials, which has been published by our SafeSide registry team. We have quite a few papers, and as Dr. Kandel mentioned, the most recent paper on the Ocular Surface Journal received an outstanding award from the University of Sydney as an outstanding publication. And so based on this evidence for this talk, I'll be talking to you on the presentation and management of dry eye disease using data from the SafeSide Dry Eye Registry. We conducted a retrospective analysis of data contributed from 2020 November to 2025 by optometrists and ophthalmologists from everyday practice. We looked at the number of patients, demography, the dry eye disease diagnosis. We looked at the symptoms and the signs. Like previously said, we used this questionnaire as the OSDI and the Ocular Comfort Index, and the scores by the patient were arranged in severity based on the numbers: normal, mild, moderate, or severe dry eye symptoms. We also have the PHQ-4 Patient Health Questionnaire 4, which is used to screen patients for anxiety and depression, where a score of 3 or more indicate symptoms of anxiety and depression. So on our results, we have 16 optometrists and ophthalmologists from 12 practices across Australia, France, Nepal, Nigeria, Spain, and the United Kingdom contribute data for 868 patients, comprising 3,618 clinical visits. We have an average age of patients about 52 years old, with the age ranging from 14 to 100 years. We have mostly female, and then we have majority Caucasians, Indian, and Asian. The dry eye disease diagnosis based on clinicians' judgment was mostly evaporative, and is caused by excessive tear evaporation from the eye surface. We also have the symptoms recorded where more people have symptoms score indicating severe symptoms of dry eye disease using each of the questionnaires. And for the symptoms of anxiety and depression as well, we have about 1 in 4 patients screened to have these symptoms. And you could see from this result that those symptoms appear to be more in female. But looking at the spread of the data on a graph, we could see that even though the female tend to report more symptoms than male, they were not quite significant in difference. We also have this OCI questionnaire spread the same way. And then looking at the clinical signs, again, it's obvious here that females tend to have worse signs of dry eye disease than males. And these are the normal values for Schirmer test, is what you use to test the tear volume, and then the tear stability, the eye surface staining, and the tear osmolarity. These numbers were far less than the expected normal. And this picture on the far bottom is just an example of eye surface staining. And when we group the surface staining to know the severity, mild, minimal, moderate, and severe, majority of patients, over 55%, were mostly mild, moderate to severe staining. We also looked at the meibomian gland dysfunction, and we found that about 94% of patients had mild to severe dysfunctioning of the eye lipid producing glands. And also looking at the treatment commonly used by patients in everyday practice, we found that most patients use artificial tears or tear lubricants, and also anti-inflammatory drugs was mostly used and were mostly the cyclosporine brand or the FML, the fluorometholone. However, no adverse events were recorded in the registry. So using this Safe Side Dry registry, we've been able to gather and analyze data of what is happening to patients and how much they are suffering from everyday practice. And most patients seen by the clinicians had evaporative dry eye disease and are associated with severe symptoms. Majority of patients required a range of treatments, including artificial tears, mostly artificial tears, and other therapeutic procedures too were recorded. This large real-world data set showed that female sex was associated with worse clinical symptoms and signs of dry eye disease. Clinicians should be aware that the mental health of patients with symptomatic dry eye disease may be compromised. And so, as previously highlighted as well, we are running clinical trial now looking at the new treatment for dry eye disease. And this contact will be shared on the chat for anyone who is interested to participate. I'd like to thank you.
Thank you, Negosi, for your presentation. I would like to remind you to please write your questions on the Q&A in the Q&A box down your screen for the Q&A session at the end of the presentations. So now let's move on to our next speaker. Well, so our next speaker is Professor Jennifer Craig. She's a professor in ophthalmology and head of the Ocular Surface Laboratory at the University of Auckland in New Zealand. She will present on In the Blink of an Eye, Simple Solutions to Enhance Everyday Eye Comfort and Health. Welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you very much. Hopefully you can see my screen there. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me. I'm just going to talk about some of the simple solutions to dry eye. Now, the tear film we know is so tiny, we can hardly see it. It's colorless, transparent, tiny volume, and its thickness is about is about 1/10 of the thickness of a human hair. Without it, though, we wouldn't be able to see. It's really important for nourishing the surface of the eye, for allowing nutrients and oxygen to get to the eye, and for protecting it, both physically and in terms of antimicrobial agents. And it's a carefully structured being, the tear film, with mucin towards the corneal surface, towards the clear surface of the eye that helps hold the tear film on. A large part that's aqueous, an aqueous component with some mucins through it, and a very thin but important lipid layer on the surface that acts like a blanket and helps protect the tear film from rapid evaporation. But it's not a standalone component. It's part of an interconnected system that interacts with the tissues of the ocular surface, the clear cornea, the conjunctiva, which overlies the white of the eye, and the eyelids, along with the glands that produce the tears, and the neural reflex arc, which actually is important because we need good sensitivity of our cornea in order to be able to produce tears and in order to be able to blink at the right time. But when things go wrong, then we end up with dry eye, and it's a very common problem. It affects around at least 30% of the population, so around 1 in 3 of the population, and results in a number of different symptoms, as you've already heard. And that has a massive impact on quality of life. We know that in the severest cases, it's been equated to having angina or dialysis, the need for dialysis. And it affects people's ability to work, not necessarily through absenteeism from not turning up at work, but presenteeism, which is turning up at work and being unable to function. It's associated with depression, and there's a huge financial burden for patients themselves and in terms of society. So how does dry eye arise? Well, there's actually a multitude of different reasons why. It's considered a multifactorial disease. And this is a range of the conditions that can be at play. And what we do is we divide those into 3 main areas: the tear film deficiencies, eyelid anomalies, and ocular surface abnormalities. And we look at the components from within each of these when we examine the eye. So just touching on 1 or 2 of them just now, because I'm limited in the time. Aqueous deficiency is probably your true dry eye, not enough fluid. If we equate that to plumbing, then if we have our sink in front of us, it's simply the tap is not releasing enough fluid. So we're not keeping the ocular surface, we're not keeping the basin full, we're not keeping the ocular surface as wet as it should be. When it comes to lipid deficiency, that's that top oil layer. That's usually because of meibomian gland dysfunction, where the glands that produce the oils become blocked, and they can even drop out, they can even atrophy with time. And if we don't have enough oil being produced by these glands, then the tears will evaporate too quickly, around 4-fold faster than if the lipid layer is good. But it's not just the components of the tear film, there's also the eyelids that are at play. And if we have a look in this area highlighted in the red oval, you can see an area where the tears are not actually covering the surface of the eye. And this is because of incomplete lid closure. And the most common cause for that at the moment is digital screen use. And what's so important about this blink, about the blinking and the eyelid closure? Well, we know that we don't produce the oils as fast or as completely if we don't have that expression from the glands, which occurs because of the muscles in the eyelids, which are triggered by the blink. So the blink is very important. We also have to think about the ocular surface, the eye's surface. If we have anything growing on the surface, then we don't have good alignment between the surface and the eyelid. A pterygium is one example. You might know of that. It's very common in this part of the world from a lot of UV light exposure. Now, if you look at those pictures on the right, those lines on the right-hand side, the top one is like a normal ocular surface, and the one underneath would be an irregular surface. And you can see if we bring an eyelid down on top of these, We get the nice alignment in the top one, which can recreate a tear film nicely, but in the bottom one, we don't get that when there are lumps and bumps on the surface. And that can happen for a number of different reasons. And here's another one with pingueculae. You can also get conjunctival chalasis, which is excess conjunctival tissue, which stops the eyelids blinking properly and creating a new tear film. So how do we go about fixing dry eye? Well, as I said, you need to be a bit of a sleuth and you need to work out exactly what has gone wrong. And it's possibly more than one thing. These are not mutually exclusive. Patients will often have more than one thing that's going on at one time and would need to fix each one of those individually in order to resolve all symptoms. In the case of the anatomical misalignment, then we need to go for realignment. So in this case, it might be something like surgery that's required in order to restore the alignment. However, there's many, many much more simple things that we can do for the vast majority of people. Lifestyle modifications is one of them. There are some risk factors for dry eye that we can't do much about, or age, sex, ethnicity. Those things we're kind of stuck with. But there are a lot of lifestyle factors that are modifiable. Our use of cosmetics, digital screen use, what we use to improve our health that might not be improving it as much as we think. Environmental factors that we're exposed to, our sleep habits, nutrition, for example. When it comes to the aqueous deficiency, when that was a quantity issue, we try to retain what we have on the surface of the eye. We can do that with moisture retaining spectacles. These are spectacles that you can see on the two pictures on the left-hand side that have silicone inserts held on by strong magnets that can be slipped in order to close off the area around the back of the spectacles and stop the wind getting to the eye and help reduce the evaporation of tears. Contact lenses can create a reservoir to keep moisture at the surface of the eye. And we have punctal plugs, which can be used to block off the drainage. But far and above the most common is the use of tear supplements or dry eye drops. So I thought I'd just touch on them. So are they all the same? No, they're certainly not. You'll know that if you go and look in the pharmacy, there are a whole range of different prices, and that's generally because they contain a lot of different components. And when you're prescribed or recommended artificial tears by your healthcare practitioner, there's actually a lot of thought that goes into choosing the right one. They may be trying to avoid preservatives if you use the drops a lot, looking at the components within them, perhaps hyaluronic acid to try to retain more fluid within at the surface of your eye. They may be trying to counteract the saltiness of the tears that tends to occur in dry eye, to protect the ocular surface with special things called bioprotectants or osmoprotectants. And almost certainly they'll be trying to target the dry eye subtype that you have, trying to match it with whatever is missing in your own tear film. So we've done some studies in Auckland looking at drop use, and it was interesting to find that when we trialed people using drops 4 times a day, we saw some really good results in the symptoms within 1 month. But following them up every month after, we started to see changes in the ocular surface, which was really encouraging, improvements in the health of the surface, so that less people had a dry eye diagnosis by the end of the 6-month trial. What we learned from this is it's best to apply drops regularly. You'll have heard of the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff kind of analogy that we use. Don't wait until until your symptoms are really bad before you use the drops. It's very difficult for the drops to then help get you back to where you needed to be. So if you use them regularly, you can actually protect against your tear film destabilizing. Another thing we learned was if your symptoms improve within the first month, don't stop using them, keep using them, because we can actually see those improvements in the health of the eye afterwards. But if they don't work within that first month, if you're not seeing any symptomatic improvement after a month, then that's a good time to talk to your eye care practitioner to see if there's an alternative or an additional therapy that you should use. Now, when we come to lipid deficiency, we can use some of these lipid drops. Some of these drops contain oil in them now to try and mimic that lipid layer of the tears. That's kind of a bit of a quick fix. And sometimes what we'd like to do is try to improve the gland function as a longer term fix. And so you'll be asked by your practitioners to try and look at lid cleansing and using heat and light therapies often to try to fix the lipid deficiency associated with meibomian gland dysfunction. Lid cleansers come in all shapes and forms. Some have tea tree oil in them. If you have Demodex, you might be recommended those. There's no good evidence to say one is particularly better than the other, but it is important to use a dedicated product. Important not to rely on something like baby shampoo in its diluted form, which can actually cause inflammation on the surface of the eye. It was never designed for use in the eye, and it's just a little too harsh for the ocular surface. We look at warming the lids to try and get those oils out, to melt them and get the oils out. And there's an increasing number of in-office therapies. But don't forget about the things you can do from home. Warm compresses, if applied according to instructions, so every day, 10 minutes a day, every day at least, then you can get improvements in the tear film and reductions in symptoms from their use. Some things you don't do, and that is to rely on a heated washcloth. Don't just use a wet washcloth. It really doesn't retain the heat long enough, so it's not been shown not to be so effective. When it comes to the eyelids not closing, you might need surgery if there's a true inability to close the eyes, but that's fairly rare. Mostly what we're seeing is patients who are not blinking completely due to the use of computers. Computer use, we interact with the screen and change the way in which we blink. We don't blink as often or as fully. So we look at ways in which we might be able to encourage better blinking habits. And you can do this along with me. You can close your eyes, pause for 2 seconds, open your eyes and relax. Close your eyes, pause for 2 seconds, squeeze your eyes closed, open your eyes and relax. And that's one cycle of one type of blinking exercise. There are a number of different ones around. And this is the idea of this is to try and get you into better blinking habits. But do they actually work? Well, we tried that out in a study as well, and we were able to find that they do in fact work. We did it in a short-term study, so the immediate impact of just doing 20 blinking exercises, rotations in a row, and we found that that improved the quality of the blink. And when we sent people off for 4 weeks to do that at home, they improved in a lot of the different parameters, both symptoms and the signs of dry eye. But what we did find was that compliance was challenging. Just like going to the gym and your exercises, it tends to drop off if you're not concentrating. So we're looking at other ways of trying to help people remember to do the blinking exercises. Looking at smartphone apps that might be able to be used. We did a study where we randomized people to getting reminders and not getting reminders to do blinking exercises. And we found that sure enough, approximately twice as many blinks were logged by the people in the group who did receive reminders from those that didn't. Symptoms improved in both groups, but tended to be slightly better in those with the, with the reminders. By weeks 3 and 4, tear film stability improved in the reminder group only, and both groups showed a decline in compliance over the 4-week period. So really important to keep them up if you're doing these exercises. So in summary, dry eye is an impactful disease. It affects millions across the world, and there's very many reasons why it can appear. We need to understand what those drivers are, but we're learning more about the condition, how it arises, and how best that we can manage it. And that's through targeted therapy really becoming the norm. So that we're actually trying to target the issues that people have, the individual issues that they have, the deficiencies they have. Simple strategies begin with even just lifestyle modifications. There's a huge amount that you can do yourself, and work with your eye care practitioner to determine the best solution for you. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Jennifer, for an amazing talk, giving us some advice how to manage dry eye disease. So let's moving on to our next speaker. Okay, so our next speaker is Miss Robin Cooper. She will share her experience as a patient with dry eye disease. Welcome, Robin.
Thank you. So I'm just going to read it if that's all right.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
My name is Robin. I've suffered from dry eye disease for nearly 20 years. I was diagnosed when I was 43. My eyes were red, sore, scratchy and tired, more so after I'd been outdoors and as the day progressed. When they became uncomfortable, I visited an ophthalmologist to investigate. Schirmer's tear test was done, along with some other tests, which confirmed my symptoms were due to decreased tear production. I had punctal plugs put in both eyes, one of which is still there 20 years later. It was like a miracle. My eyes felt like they were back to normal again, and I had no symptoms for many years. About 10 years ago, my eyes deteriorated. Again, by the end of the day, my eyes were dry, scratchy, and tired, and I had to close them to get relief. At about the same time, I started working part-time again, which didn't help my symptoms. I woke up one morning and couldn't open my right eye. It was so painful and red, and my left eye was not much better. It felt like my lids were stuck to my eyeballs. I went back to the ophthalmologist, and my condition had deteriorated and more treatment was needed. So we upped the ante with gel at night, heat and massage of my eyelids, anti-inflammatory drops, and artificial tears when needed. I also tried Restasis, which didn't really help my symptoms at the time. I've tried several different treatments over the years, but to this day, I haven't really found anything that truly makes my eyes comfortable for a whole day. Having dry eyes has had a major impact on my life and my well-being. Each day I have a routine that I have been doing for many years: heat and massage, prescription drops, more drops throughout the day to try and keep them comfortable. Living with dry eyes is not easy. I don't think people realise what it's like to always feel like you have grit in your eyes and feel like they are scratchy and dry. I carry a makeup around with me, a bag around with me with several various drops, and depending on how my eyes feel, depends on which one I put in. They help to varying degrees, which is good, but I'd love to find something that works to make my eyes comfortable, if not all, but most of the time. I've had to adjust my lifestyle in many ways because of my dry eyes. I don't wear eye makeup as much as it's too irritating. It is really kept for special occasions, although I'm very excited to finally try a mascara that was developed for people with sensitive eyes. I've had to further reduce my work hours. My eyes are just too sore at the end of one day to back up again the next. It's difficult to research anything, whether it be a holiday, home renovating, or a new restaurant, as most research is done on the computer, which, you guessed it, makes your eyes dry. I do the best I can. Work requires a computer, but I now spend less time on devices for pleasure, as it's too uncomfortable. Around a fire or a fire pit, I always sit upwind. I move away as soon as it changes direction. The breeze combined with the smoke is impossible. I move around the fire to avoid the smoke. It's like I'm sitting in the second row at a theatre. Moving air and wind is especially difficult. It feels like my eyes dry out much faster. We visit friends and family in Brisbane, where it is hot and humid. They have all the windows open and the fans on. I position myself with my back to the fan or the aircon and sometimes wear a cap to shield my eyes. It's all about catching the breeze up there, and I'm all about avoiding it. I also have a pair of wraparound type sunglasses, which helps protect my eyes, particularly if outdoors for a long time. Driving long distances has also become harder for me recently, so I have to have drops readily available in the car if I need them. Reading, something I used to really enjoy, is also done in short bursts now. I mostly listen to audiobooks. By the end of the day, I close my eyes in front of the TV because my eyes are sore. My husband always tells me to go to bed, but I'm not tired, it's just my eyes. One thing I have found helpful, if they are really dry and uncomfortable, is to put gel in my eyes and lay down with my eyes closed for at least 5 minutes. It's like a reboot in the afternoon after a big day at work or in the outdoors. My eyes have deteriorated over the past year or two, and now I find my sight, which was previously clear, has become milky because my tear breakup time has decreased. As a result, I have further reduced my days at work. It's just too hard on my eyes to work more than 1 or 2 days now. I've also told my family that if I'm ever unconscious, to tell hospital staff to put gel or drops in my eyes to stop them drying out. I'm half joking, but it's true. I'm currently 10 weeks into a trial, and I feel these drops have made a big difference to my well-being. As part of the trial, I've been able to simplify my drop routine, no heat and massage, no extra drops apart from artificial tears, and I have clear sight most of the time, which has also made an enormous difference to me. I keep commenting to my husband how clear everything is. I would be more than happy to stay on these rather than go back to my old routine. So far, I haven't really found anything that has improved my situation significantly, but I'm always hopeful that one day we will. I always ask about possible new treatments or how I can do things differently. Prior to the trial, I found artificial tears and high-low fort to be the most useful, and also using a gel or ointment overnight gives relief. I also use Sustain hydration and have found it helpful, but it's really trial and error and can be different day to day and season to season. So as you can see, dry eyes has had quite an impact on my life, but I try to remain positive and hopeful that something will be available through research that will help. Sooner rather than later would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin, for sharing your experience with us. Probably your tips will help someone here on the attending today. So let's moving on to our last speaker. So our last speaker is Amanda Crace. She's the Associate Director of Development for the Faculty of Medicine and Health at the University of Sydney. Welcome, Amanda.
Thank you so much for inviting me to speak today. I acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land in which I am on today, the Gadigal people, and pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. I'd like to start by sharing the current funding landscape. In Australia, eye research is primarily funded through a combination of public and private sources, such as private donations or private or family foundations. Public funding comes from government agencies such as the National Health and Medical Research Council, the NHMRC, and the Medical Research Future Fund, the MRFF. These are competitive government schemes providing grants and fellowships to support researchers. The NHMRC and the MRFF only have a success rate of around 10%. So from these averages, you can see that the success rate for Australian researchers nationally is an extremely competitive process. This can lead to many talented researchers and invaluable knowledge leaving the sector or research that's not funded. So this further reduces the opportunity for treatments and care. So the challenges that researchers face is that it continues to be difficult to secure dedicated, prioritised funding for anterior eye conditions research. Yet conditions such as dry eye disease continues to impact an increasing number of individuals globally, 1 out of 4 adults in Australia. There are limited resources available for research, and funding organisations must allocate their resources widely across many medical conditions and scientific disciplines, meaning dry eye research is competing with other important areas of medical research for funding. So the cost of research can be a significant challenge. Cutting-edge research, especially clinical trials or genetic studies, can be expensive. Developing therapies, as Jennifer Craig had mentioned, is also an expensive, challenging process, and a lack of awareness can translate into less public support and consequently less funding. Addressing these challenges requires a collaborative effort from government, private sector, and non-profit organisations to raise awareness, allocate resources, and promote research and development in the field of dry eye research. So how can philanthropy help? Public advocacy and education are crucial in garnering support for funding research, and we are delighted that so many of you have joined us here this evening. For purpose, foundations and philanthropic individuals can play a significant role in funding dry eye research in Australia. Donations and support from our donors plays a huge, important and vital role to bridge the current funding gap. If we have secure long-term funding sources, this helps ensure that we attract and retain the best minds. Researchers can shape their research agenda based on the greatest need and the most important impact, rather than funding what is available to them. Mid to long-term research projects can be designed and undertaken supporting more detailed and meaningful data, such as the Save Site Dry Eye Registry, which is importantly established to provide real-world data on dry eye natural history and to inform on the outcomes of treatments for this disease in the longer term. The work done by the Dry Eye Registry also requires funding to train students in research to enable them to provide future solutions to reduce the growing burden from eye diseases. Secure funding means that research can be accelerated as consistent progress is made and can help impact the lives of patients such as Robin Cooper and thousands more. Philanthropic funding allows researchers to prioritise research. With a growing population and increasing number of people with dry eye conditions, it's actually vital that our researchers are able to continue this really important work. So thank you very much for your time this evening. And if anyone would like to learn more about how you can support this research, please get in touch via the details provided on the screen. You can scan the QR code if you would like to make a donation. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda, for the information provided. So now we're gonna have like about 5 minutes for quick Q&A session. So I invite everyone, all the speakers, to turn on their videos. So also I put on the chat box the link for our feedback form. So if you can click on that and help us to complete the form, that would be great. So how can the real-world data from Dry Eye Registry help clinicians develop personalized treatment plans for patients who experience severe dry eye symptoms but show only mild or no signs on clinical examination? To follow up on that question, are there any specific biomarkers or patient factors emerging from the registry that could help guide more targeted therapies?
Yes, that's a very good question. So the registry is very helpful for patients that have a lot of symptoms but don't show signs, because we get a precise measure of the symptoms using the questionnaires. And those questionnaires provide scores that can be compared to groups of other patients with dry eye. And if the score is very high and there's not many signs, sometimes that indicates there might be some corneal neuropathic pain. And that then requires a different sort of management approaches in addition to the dry eye management. The registry at the moment isn't collecting information on biomarkers, but this is a very emerging and important field, and will probably allow us to understand more about dry eye disease. So it is real world data is very helpful, because not only for the individual patient, but also when we have a large cohort of patients, we can actually look at the factors underlying the demographic factors, the factors of the dry eye, the factors of the symptoms that are underlying the different characteristics and types of dry eye disease.
Perfect, Stephanie. Also, there's another question about recommendations of eye drops or treatments for dry eye to use for someone who has keratoconus and wears RGP contact lenses daily.
Jennifer, do you want to comment about that? You do contact lenses?
I don't do a huge amount of contact lenses, but sorry, what was the question? I was busy answering questions in the chat, sorry.
Thank you, Jennifer. Now, is there recommendations of eye drops or treatments for dry eye to use for someone who has keratoconus
and wears
RGP contact lenses daily?
Yeah, I think with any contact lenses on the surface of the eye, you want to be using drops that are not preserved, because you're going to be retaining some of the fluid behind the lens potentially. But no, I don't know specifically any. I mean, just check on all products. They'll tell you whether they're suitable or not for contact lens wear. But we do know that contact lenses disrupt the tear film. Just physically, they cause they move around in the tear film, and that does make it difficult to form a good tear film. So yeah, drops can sometimes help that, but the effect might be quite short-lived.
Okay. There's another question. There are many questions. Really hard to pick one. There are also some questions answered on the chat. So there's one question. I have ocular rosacea, and rosacea, when I get a flare up on my face, I I informed by a dermatologist to use doxycycline for 10 days. I've had good results for both eyes.
I answered that one,
Yeah,
Maria.
did you? Oh,
So
so
yes,
combined.
doxycycline is something that we actually do use for eye treatment as well. So when somebody has meibomian gland dysfunction, we can use doxycycline, but it's normally used rather than a short course with a full dose. We normally use a low dose over a longer period of time when we're using it to treat meibomian gland dysfunction. And so it might be like a 12-week course of a low dose of doxycycline. Another alternative that can be used orally is azithromycin, although I think in Australia, do you have azithromycin drops?
No, we have it orally, but there is some association with heart arrhythmias. And so there has to be some care when people prescribe it.
Absolutely. And with doxycycline, you need to be really careful as well because it has a number of contraindications and also some side effects you need to be aware of, especially if you're exposed to high levels of UV like you are in Australia often, because you can become photosensitive from it.
And the other thing to remember with rosacea is that there's often trigger factors. And so if you can identify the trigger factors and avoid them or manage them, that can help reduce the flare-ups too.
There's another question. Have any of you worked with IPL or QMR to help with dry eye?
Yep.
If so, would you recommend it?
Yeah, I think it's worth a try. Certainly for IPL, I had no faith in that whatsoever when I first tried it, and this was about a decade ago, and I did a trial because I didn't think there was anything in it and proved myself wrong. So we did a trial. It was masked. We didn't know who, when we were doing our assessments, we didn't know who had had the treatment and who hadn't. We had a group who were given a sham treatment, a pretend treatment, and we saw significant differences. So it does have an effect. It tends to build up over time. This is with the IPL. So you need to have a few treatments, normally at least 3 or 4 before patients start to see a difference. As with anything, it doesn't work for everybody, but there are good effects seen with it. So it is more common. QMR, there's some papers out saying that it is quite effective. We did a trial again where we had a sham treatment, and we found often they don't do the sham treatments in these trials. They just do a retrospective review of how patients have got on. But we did a properly controlled trial and found that we actually got good results in the sham group as well, even if we didn't switch the machine on. So we think that's a little bit from the pressure of the goggles. You wear goggles to do the QMR, which is quantum molecular resonance. So essentially shaking the cells and the tissues to get the things working better with the electrical stimulus. So yeah, I think some of the effect from that comes from the pressure of the goggles on the eyes during the treatment, but we did get some differences between the groups, so it seems to have some effect.
Yeah, I think it really highlights, particularly with these treatments, what you were saying before, Jennifer, about the need to tailor them. Not everyone's going to be suitable for IPL. It's important that you have an assessment to see whether you are. The clinic, when you do a trial, you include people with certain characteristics, and so it's not the whole, group of everyone with dry eye. It's really trying to understand your dry eye and find the right treatment.
Very much so.
Thanks, Maria.
And one last question. Is there any evidence that Roacutan medication affects meibomian glands?
It is seen in patients that take Roaccutane that some of them do develop meibomian gland dysfunction. Some dermatologists will send their patients for review prior to starting Roaccutane to make sure that we optimize the ocular surface prior, and then we monitor them generally whilst they're on Roaccutane. Doesn't happen to everyone, but yes, there is a risk.
Okay, perfect. One last question. Someone asked, the inserts for the glasses to stop wind in the eyes, what are they called?
So that's the moisture retaining spectacles, but you can get them, I think, Panoptics.
There's 7 Eyes, yeah, Panoptic. 7 Eyes, and then there's Goggle Man. And then you can also go to, the Cancer Council shop or something, or bike shops have good wraparound glasses too.
Yeah, my patients used to go to the motorbike shop to try them
Yeah.
all on and then go and buy them more cheaply online.
Yeah,
But yeah,
yeah.
showing up at the motorbike shop looking like
Yeah.
the
It
motor
really
juggling
depends on fit. So often you
clients.
can get them online, but yes, you say it's better to get them fitted.
All right. Now, well, thank you everyone for your questions. And as I said, some they were answered in the chat box. So also don't forget to respond to the feedback survey. And by the end of the week, we're gonna send an email with the link of the recording and the feedback survey as well. So I would like to thank our speakers for their amazing presentations today, for the audience again for their questions, and thanks for joining us this year, and have a great evening, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.